John, Trey Lance has a new throwing motion, according to one clip, which has been circulating on the internet. It's got people buzzing.
Yeah, it's April. We still got a ways to go till actual football is even thought about playing. If you don't consider OTAs true playing because they're not wearing pads, but we got to give props where props is due. I would say this is one of the biggest question marks. Remember, was it last year coming into the offseason that when it was clear that he was just going to be named, given the starter, the thing was going to be rigged? Like, could he just slightly improve a little quicker motion? And it looks, in the one clip we have, give the guy, looks good.
Yeah.
I think anyone who's golf's bit different than the throwing motion, but, they often say in golf, like the pressure you resort back. And I think that, coaches in football will say it's specifically with the mechanics of throwing. We can work on stuff, but your muscle memory, because typically, I would imagine baseball swings similar, things that you have been doing for your entire life, it is really, really hard. It's why I think like people go like when someone is able to change their baseball swing, like the Justin Turner, the way those guys did that, Josh Donaldson did it, or Tiger changes swing. Like people inside baseball or golf or football mechanics, like give you extra, like it's so difficult to do that and then just maintain that in competition.
Yeah, because football is so different than golf, than baseball, pitching. Pitchers rework their motions all the time, but you're static. You're not moving. Baseball, hitters, you're not moving. The ball's moving. Golf, the ball and you are not moving. Football, you are moving, and people are running at you and trying to make you move. But I would agree. David Lombardi was the first one that I think found it, at least posted it, that I saw. It looks better. It looks different. It looks tighter. All the things we talk about with Trey are not centered necessarily on his throwing motion. Really, when you think about it, once the season started, and he only played a game and a half, everything that happened afterwards was not really about his throwing motion. I think you and I'll speak for myself, had kind of come to terms with however he plays, he's going to probably be playing with a throwing motion that doesn't allow him to get rid of the football as quickly as Tom Brady does, or as quickly as Jimmy Garoppolo did. I thought that was one of Jimmy's strengths. But it turns out the coach he's working with is a guy named Jeff Christensen. Throw It Deep is the name of his QB coaching business. And Jeff Christensen has coached Jimmy Garoppolo. He's coaching Patrick Mahomes right now. In fact, Jeff Christensen, John, Trey Lance's Jeff Christensen, is part of the quarterback mafia at Eastern Illinois. Look at the all-time, I'm putting up now the all-time touchdown career records list at Eastern Illinois. Jimmy Garoppolo 1, Tony Romo 2, Sean Payton 3, and Jeff Christensen 4. So that's Trey's guy right there. Pretty incredible. Mike Shanahan was a quarterback at Eastern Illinois, lacerated spleen, did not finish his playing career. But that's a hell of a list.
That's a pretty incredible 1, 2, 3 of name recognition, fame / contracts. John Payton as a coach, he's making $18 million. He's like a high paid left tackle now. So
and Jeff Christensen played 8 years in the NFL.
So what a group. That's in all seriousness for that program. That's pretty cool, right? I'm blowing that thing up like when you walk into my football facility.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I'm with you though on. Ultimately, the throwing motion got moved way down in the way we talk about you because in theory, I go, well, the quicker your motion is, I think Josh Allen sometimes resorts back, and he had his moments this year where he was inaccurate and people think he can get a little loosey-goosey. But you go, just because you get rid of the ball quickly, i.e. Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't view Jimmy Garoppolo as an accurate quarterback. It's almost like accuracy has less to do with either a fluid motion, side motion, whatever, and more to do just with the individual player. Like some guys were just accurate and some guys are inaccurate, or some guys struggle with accuracy. Because you go, Derek's a good example, right? I would say just if you're teaching kids or high school, like Derek Carr, just the way he throws the football is pretty natural, seems pretty compact. And he has his moments where he's really accurate, and then he has a year when he's inaccurate. And this is what, the draft's right around the corner. I think evaluating a quarterback, whether it's scouting him in the league, whether it's scouting him coming out of college, whether it's scouting him and trying to coach it through it, it's so difficult because all the variables. Like ultimately, you give the guy credit, like you're working on something that you can control. But think of the other variables of like, well, reading defenses, of knowing what to do during the different coverages, of knowing what to do when you're on the field and not know what's coming. It's stuff that's really hard to quantify, and even coaches and other players around you don't know what it's going to look like till the live bullets are flying. And in football, the only time live bullets really fly, kind of training camp, but not truly training camp, but games.
Yeah.
I mean, like in baseball, I can just take a simulated BP against fucking Pedro Martinez in his prime, and it's a little different. 50,000 people are watching, but still, he's throwing 96 and his breaking stuff, right? Or basketball, we can play a 5-on-5 and 10 NBA players on the court, and it's not an NBA game, but it's still relatively close. Like in football, what's going to happen in, I would say, the next couple months on the field is not that translatable. It's hard to take that much away and know what's going to look like, right, come pads on against other teams. Which makes
by the way,
the sport hard to kind of what makes it the most unique, I think, of like all the major sports.
But I do think we could compare, and this is what Kyle Shanahan will do, right? He'll compare how accurate he thought Trey was in camp last year to how accurate he is in camp this year. Does he get more accurate?
Yeah.
And as things get sped up a little bit, does he maintain what looks like a tighter throwing motion?
Darnold's always had a kind of a loopy motion too.
Who?
Sam Darnold.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
I don't think he has like a
more. I would say like more kind of shot putty.
Yeah, but it's also kind of long.
Kind of long, yeah. By the way, before we go any further, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe. If you're listening to the pod, leave us a review, Apple Podcast, 5 stars, and leave a question in that review. That's how you get in the mailbag. Our data shows that half of you who watch this video are not subbed. So subscribe, and thanks. Help the channel. One thing, I heard an interview that Jeff Christensen did with NFL Radio a couple days ago on Sirius XM, and when he was talking about all the different, they got into it with, hey, we're not going to talk about any specifics with your guys, but what do you do? How do you help guys? And he said it's a lot of like watching the film, trying to figure out what they're feeling physically when they're throwing and how they can manipulate he wants to take what he's seeing on film, understand what they're feeling that makes them throw that way and change it. And that's always kind of been the way that he's done it. One interesting thing he said was, because he started talking about he talked about Mahomes. He said he's one of the finest people. He said, it's surreal to me you can be that talented and that gracious. And he said he thinks the number one reason he was
works
out of the
with
league,
Mahomes too.
Mahomes and Lance are working together. Yeah.
Gotcha. Oh, okay. I guess that makes sense. I mean, that's.
Does that change the way you look at it?
No, I guess I knew that he was working. Mahomes was around. I didn't know that he was part of the Christensen group. I would say that doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
I mean.
So, somebody actually posted a photo before I finish that point, a photo of them.
The kid in the middle, 17 years old, happens to be an enormous recruit and looks like a fucking man-child. Dante
Moore. You asked me if this photo's at UCLA. I think it is, because in the background you can see some like jerseys and stuff.
It's been a place, right? Russell Wilson threw there forever. To Brady. You should be able to. That can't help you recruiting. I don't know what can.
Somebody sent this photo to us and said, "I have a submission," which we have a rule, generally speaking, of not evaluating hairlines unless people submit it themselves out of respect for the parties involved.
I also give you a line of delineation in your, I would say under 27, 28, you're kind of coming into your own, feeling it out. He's not a total lost cause yet, but it's clear where it's headed.
Yeah. Also, this is post-workout. Your hair's not exactly how you want it sometimes.
But I think it's been pretty clear since he's been on the team that he's got some follicle issues.
Challenges.
So I'm really more taken away by one of Trey's defining characteristics, his size. Mahomes is 28 years old. That kid was born in 2005. I mean,
in the middle, yeah.
Look at that fucking guy. I mean, are we sure that's not the next Caleb Williams? I know nothing about him beside him being a big recruit, but holy moly.
Because and Trey next to Mahomes is a good little comp. Not that we needed to know that Trey was big, but the point I was going to make on Mahomes is just what Jeff Christensen said about Mahomes, and then he said that he thought the number one reason he was out of the league after 8 years was he had a bad attitude. He's like, I was really wound too tight, and I don't work well with guys like that. And so
guys
he wasn't.
like he used to be.
Yeah, like just guys that have a bat that are difficult, whatever the case was. He didn't expound on it too much, but that's a positive reflection of Trey, that this guy works with him, and obviously that Trey's around Mahomes, which is we're worse people for Trey to be hanging out with and practicing with than
I'd say the one
Mahomes.
thing the
So
49ers have pretty dialed in now, whatever, 6-7 years into the operation, is the character stuff, right? I mean, I would say the worst it's really gotten the last couple years is like Jimmy. Right? It's like Jimmy can just kind of tap out and go, but when he's around, he's a good guy. He kind of turned into an independent contractor. It sounds like the way they, not in a terrible way, but that's really kind of the worst thing they're dealing with in terms of teammates, in terms of guys all in. I think a lot of teams struggle with that, right? And a lot of teams, especially newer coaches, like Josh McDaniels is a good example. Like, it doesn't feel like he's got a great idea of that stuff. Like Darren Waller, last year they extend him. This year they trade him when he's getting on his fucking honeymoon. It's like, do you kind of know what you're looking for? And that's a huge element to me of building a team in football is like, do you know what you're looking for?
yeah,
Because once you know what you're looking for with humans, John Middlecoff was taught to scout. Like, you don't need to be Ozzie Newsome. Like, it's a learnable skill to figure out who can play and who can't play, and specifically what you're looking for. Like most people listening to this, like you watch football long enough, like you got a pretty good idea who can play and who can't. But what's hard for any human being is like judging other humans, understanding what matters and what doesn't matter. We all have biases of things that bother us and not, but how does that actually impact stuff? Especially guys coming out of college, I think you can put emphasis into things that we're all young human beings, things that are very, very learnable, things that aren't, things that are non-negotiables. I think I stumbled upon a Trent Dilfer spring game audio, and he just, he basically taught like playing, like one thing they're trying to do at UAB, like any new coach, build confidence, teach guys how to win. And he's like, we can teach you confidence. Like that's a learnable skill. And there are things that are learnable. And then there are just things that like, Reuben Foster, like there's a level of immature of just like, this guy's going to grow up. Right, I think Debo's a good example of a guy who really feels like he's grown into his own on the team.
yeah.
And then there are just guys that just never get it, and that's just a hard. You're gonna miss sometimes. And then there's the level of like, I don't think anyone's ever questioned Trey Lance's like work ethic, character, and stuff. Because that to me with quarterbacks would be, if you and me ran a team, that would be a non-negotiable with that position. Any question marks off the field, maturity.
So you wouldn't draft Baker?
Well, I would have, and I remember Coward hated that video of him getting tackled, and that's why when I watched that Stetson Bennett, like, I'm not fucking with that. Both Stetson Bennett and Baker are good examples. Remember, they were older players too, and it's like,
Yeah.
what are we doing, guys?
I'm still waiting to find out if Stetson graduated at Georgia or not. Been around for a long time,
But see, that's a good example.
that to me would be a red flag if you didn't.
Like to me, graduation and
At that age,
with most players is irrelevant. One thing I think a lot of scouts is like, quarterbacks, they should take everything seriously. It's why people like when, I don't need you to be a 4.0 student, but like, do you take school seriously? Because when you take school seriously, you take weight training seriously, you take film study seriously, you take, I guess Steve Kimes said the other day on Chris Long's pod, he's like, yeah, film study and focus with Kyler is definitely one area he can really grow in. Like,
oh, cool.
That's like, we're in year 5 with an enormous contract. Like, that's a disaster.
We know, Steve, you put it in his contract and then took it out when everybody found out.
I know.
Here's what that video means to me. That it's still possible for Trey Lance. I'm not saying he is about to show up and be a different player and look better, but even as I think we've been on the same page with Brock, the 49ers who have, through the whole Jimmy situation, constantly left every door open, even when doors were not open. They kept trying to like manipulate trade value for a guy that they ended up keeping. But they didn't really do that. John Lynch didn't really do that at the league meetings a couple of weeks ago. He just said, yeah, Brock's a leader in the clubhouse, right? He wasn't playing a game with that one. And they have publicly kind of left themselves, they try not to paint themselves into a corner when it's come to their quarterbacks. But with Brock, they said he's the leader in the clubhouse. But I think the fact is Brock's not going to be around for all the offseason. Trey is. And
honestly, even in training camp, probably.
In training camp, and who knows, week 1. And one thing I've said for a while now, we do have to allow for the possibility that Trey Lance improves as a player, right? And the challenge, of course, is like he doesn't play games. How is he going to improve if he doesn't play games? But this can be an area where he can improve without playing games. And even though the situation is not ideal, right? The odds are against him. He's not the starting quarterback on the 49ers right now. He is a quarterback on the 49ers. And in recent history, if you're a quarterback on the 49ers, you're going to get a chance. That's the way it's worked. And he's got a shot right now. He's got a shot to impress a lot of people.
And I'd say like that in that picture with Mahomes, when you think about it, there's how many teams in the league that have either, a super highly drafted guy the last couple of years who's their starter because he's played well, or high price guys like Dak and Cousins who are set. There are a ton of teams where everything kind of matters, right? In training camp and OTAs, and the Niners are definitely one of them, right? They don't have, like, nothing matters. Like, no one's starting over Nick Bosa. Like, the Niners have a lot of positions where Deebo Samuel doesn't have to do a goddamn thing in the offseason to, like, prove his position, right? Or Kittle. But the quarterback position is one of those where it's like if you told me Fred Warner, rolled an ankle and the first week of practice and like didn't do another, like, okay. Like there's a lot of positions that are pretty solidified. Tarvarius, quarterback is not one where they're really everything matters. But the great part about it is all those other positions, like if you're the guy if you're Drake Jackson, you get to take all the reps. That's the best part about football for all these other positions where with quarterback, usually it's very, very hard. And that's the one thing with the 49ers. You just got to fucking get all these reps with these two guys, like, and whoever, I'm sure they bring in some undrafted, free agent to just run the last group, but that group's kind of a throwaway. That's the one group that kind of doesn't matter.
Jake Hander's working out for him on Wednesday. Local pro day, Levi Stadium. Jake will be there.
I do think, Jake, I bet he gets drafted like the third or fourth round. I think he's going to benefit.
The Niners can draft a quarterback.
I bet he gets drafted higher than Stetson Bennett.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah. I think that's Stetson Bennett.
Interesting.
I think that TMZ video that'd be hard to see. And again, it's like we all have our bad moments. I mean, Dak got a DUI, and I think he's widely considered like man of the year. Like, you could have a low moment. There's a difference between a low moment and like that. It's like, I don't know.
Well, I think you're kind of, I don't know if you're alluding to this. I'll allude to it. I think that video, it feels like there's a belief that when you dig more on Bennett, not that he's a bad guy or a criminal or anything like that, but you're not exactly getting Brock, right? I think, like, I felt this way, and I said it, and you said it too, when you watched the parade, the post-game stage kind of little speech, I don't know what you would call it, after Georgia won the national championship. I didn't walk away thinking like, that's how quarterback talks when it came to Stetson Bennett.
So
I think
angry.
It was just weird. So you're not getting Brock. I've been saying that. You're not getting, I think Jake's different. But he did win. I mean, the other thing is, I thought he was a nobody watching, and he made some incredible throws last year, right? Bennett.
Yeah.
So,
no, it's not like the guy can't play. I just think that there are teams, with a guy that's not going to be your starter, some non-negotiables with him. Like, let someone else figure that out.
Yeah.
If we're wrong, guys like that typically become available more often than they turn into Cousins.
Comment on the chat. Trey's mechanics are a big part of his inconsistencies. The second clip posted showed more of his lower half, but it's still hard to tell just how in sync or consistent or repeatable his mechanics are. We know Shanahan's always talking about footwork.
Well, I think all the quarterbacks that, like, the people that revere, the legends kind of our era post, like, high school, like Manning, Brady, Breeze, even Rodgers for a long period of his time, even though he could freelance a little, like the modern version of Favre, is like mechanics, technique, like the fundamentals of just your basic center snap exchange, the original footwork, your shoulders, like everything was so elite, and Peyton Manning always got so much credit. Like, how about his zone play action fakes? Like, they took so much pride in all the basic fundamental stuff. And it's like something that I would say most great players, take a huge amount of pride in, like the fundamentals of the basic shit, like Derek Jeter, 2-out hitting, or 2-strike hitting, right? Tiger Woods, like, or Phil Mickelson, basic shit with their chipping that, like, they just never fuck around with. Those guys, like, basic footwork on a 3-step drop, like, they're never, ever fucking that up because that if you went to their practice, like how seriously they take the first period of practice, which is like just going over 3 and 5 step drops or wheel route throws or just whatever. And that's ultimately like, if you never fuck up on that, you're already ahead of the game, right? If you never miss a basic layup, like you're already ahead of 90% of people. Right?
Yeah. Yep.
So I think that just getting just basic fundamentals down with, I would say any young player, but let alone a quarterback that, you know, in some weird way is still kind of moldable in theory. But that's what's hard to judge with football. It's like, well, what's it look like, you know, blitzes and different defenses and the timing with the players, like how accurate actually is he, that it's really hard to get a gauge on that. Though you can gauge, like, we're going to react to the steps that he takes in OTAs or training camp or a preseason game. But that's a lot different, you know, every single year than regular season games, if he even gets the opportunity to start.
That's the one thing this year, though, is you got a battle going on with Sam Darnold. So you're right. There's a lot of things that, you know, in the offseason, you don't really know what they mean. But you do have two guys who are going to be competing. One's going to throw, the other's going to throw. One's going to throw twice, the other's going to throw twice. Like, they're going to be throwing against the same defense. They're going to be throwing with the same offense. We're going to be able, you know, if you're a starting quarterback and you have a bad week of accuracy in practice, it doesn't really matter that much. No one's about to take, I mean, in the sense, no one's about to take your job. But there is a competition going on. Like, you know, coach can't pretend like he's not evaluating throws that you make this time of year, because of course he is, right? Yeah. He's got to figure out who his potential opening day starter is, who his backup quarterback is, who's going to be active week 1 if Brock Purdy is healthy. What are they going to do? So that pressure, it's not a pass rush pressure, but there is going to be pressure on Trey Lance, and that is a type of pressure that can affect the way you perform.
Agreed.
Other little story here. Somebody sent us this. PFF highest graded players from the 2022 NFL draft. 1, Sauce Gardner.
Good pick.
2, Kyle Hamilton.
Like him.
Tyler Algier, the running back from BYU Falcons.
Didn't he destroy the 49ers?
Yes. 4, Drake London, Falcons.
I was a little lower on him. Turns out he's going to be pretty good.
5, Garrett Wilson, Jets.
Pretty good draft by old Joe Douglas.
6, Chris Olave.
Him and Derek get on the same page quick.
So far, this list is like the guys people thought would be good. Good.
Well, I mean, we got the 3rd pick, the 15th pick, a running back, the 8th pick, the 10th pick, like the 12th pick, the 2nd pick.
Aiden Hutchinson, 2nd pick. 8, Dameon Pierce, Texans.
I think 2nd round pick, but he's sweet.
9, Brock Purdy. 10, Christian Watson.
So you would say that Purdy, I don't know what round the BYU running back went in, but, you know, running backs can become studs in any round. It's pretty rare for a quarterback just to get the opportunity to play, right, when you're a 7th round pick, let alone have a really good season.
5th round for the running back from BYU.
So, and honestly, like, that's a good example of, like, should you take Bijan Robinson, number 10 overall? Well, I don't know. Just get the guy in the 4th round from, like, Texas Tech, who's sweet.
Dameon Pierce, 4th round, to your point.
Yeah, he's good. Purdy, yeah, I mean, that's pretty remarkable. But to me, it was just like, if you watched him play, like, he was just dramatically better than Jimmy Garoppolo, who we can say whatever we want. I think he drove a lot of people nuts. Just kind of settled in between like 13 and 16 on the quarterback rankings in the NFL, and who easily gets $30+ million for basically a year to be a bridge quarterback. Not like $10 million, $35 million guaranteed. And like, this guy was dramatically better than him. Like, I think the gap wasn't like incremental. I thought it was pretty big. And remember the numbers, their explosive passing game, their red zone passing, their points per game. They're just the eye test, the coach test, how different he coached. I mean, it wasn't even debatable for anyone that's watched the 49ers on this Shanahan-Lynch era run.
It wasn't the biggest difference. The biggest difference was the efficiency, the consistent efficiency. But a lot of people have tried to get Kyle Shanahan to change over the course of his life, I'm sure. We haven't seen Kyle do a whole lot of changing when it comes to his offense. I don't mean he doesn't make adjustments. I just mean what it looks like is what it looks like. If he gets a more mobile quarterback, he runs them. But the way he just suddenly started throwing the ball down the field with a guy whose arm isn't stronger necessarily than Jimmy's, right?
Yeah.
That said everything. That, when he drafted Trey Lance, or first wanted to draft Mac Jones and then drafted Trey Lance, that whole story, if we ever get to the true truth of it, and I think you and I, the truth is that he was willing to evaluate, at least at minimum, evaluate Mac Jones like he could have been the pick, gives us insight into Kyle, right? About what he thinks he needs to win with. Then for whatever reason, his scouting or his scouting department or all of it together won out, and they draft the more physically talented guy, Trey Lance. But, I think through the Jimmy era, the one thing that was clear what they were missing was downfield throwing. And I think if you said that the Niners become a better downfield throwing team with just a little more mobility than Garoppolo has, that's fine. It's okay with everything they have around the quarterback if you don't end up with Josh Allen's physical traits or Patrick Mahomes' physical traits or Joe Burrow's physical traits because of everything else you have. Now, 3 years from now, we'll find out. Like, can you keep winning like that? Can you keep being a Super Bowl contender like that or not? Like, I heard a debate about, the Bengals drafted all the receivers and not the offensive linemen. And even though they got their quarterback hit and sacked a lot, it still worked. And, yeah, with Joe Burrow, it worked with Joe Burrow. It's not going to work probably for 25 other teams, right?
I mean, part of it too is like, it was like they take receivers over offensive. They hit on two fucking sweet receivers. I mean, Chase is borderline top 5 wide receiver.
Yeah.
And Higgins is, I don't know if he quite gets enough credit of like, is he closer to like the being a DK, AJ Brown, Debo level second round pick than just being some like pretty good player? Because every time I watch him, it's like this guy kicks ass and takes names. Now, one problem is, and someone said this, is like, a buddy of mine in the league is like, oh, it's time to kind of pay those two guys.
Right.
Like Higgins is a really good player. He's like one of the better twos. That's receivers make $20 million, and Chase is, by the time he's time to get paid, like a $30+ million player. So it's expensive when you do hit on those positions, because wide receiver after quarterback now and defensive end is probably the highest paid position after like what we saw Tyreek and Devontae. I mean, those guys $25-30 million. I mean, Trent's making like 19-20. So now maybe that eventually changes, but whoever the next like, what's Justin Jefferson going to want? More money than Tyreek Hill. So yeah. T. Higgins might not be that level, but what is T. Higgins? He goes, well, at minimum, I'm an Amari type guy, and Amari 3 years ago got 5 for 100 at 20 years. So am I $22-23 million guy? That's why people at the draft were like, T. Higgins available. And then their GM was like, get your own wide receivers, But I think the key is like they hit on players, like they nailed it. You can take any position. Like if I take middle linebacker over right tackle, but I get Fred Warner and you get McGlinchey, I feel really fucking good about it, and you don't.
Right.
Even though the right tackle, in theory, is much more valuable big picture than a linebacker, right?
Yeah.
But if I get a high-end starter, that's why the 49ers have been such a unique build, right? They've just hit on all these positions, and the quarterback has kind of been the revolving door.
Not just build, because the building ended. Like, it's like they've maintained being a championship contender this way. And you keep wondering, can they keep it up?
They just keep hitting on it, like Hufanga, and then they're free agents. They get Ward. He's sweet immediately, right?
Well, and their guys get better. Like, Ayuk's gotten better.
Yeah.
Debo improved. I mean, they did trade for Christian McCaffrey. So let's not act like they're totally built on fifth rounders.
Well, and then their high-end players have maintained a super high-end level of play.
Right.
Like Kittle's level of play, like if you just throw him the ball, has been elite when you're right. Fred Warner has been high-end. Trent has been the best left tackle. So part of it is like there is going to be a reshuffle in a couple years, but you got to take advantage of it. Like I do think they're kind of living in the moment right now, just like the Eagles. I mean, that's what the thing with the NFC. It's like Joe Burrow said it last year, right? Our window's as long as I'm here, and clearly it is. I agree with him. Mahomes, clearly. Josh Allen, like they're disappointing second round exits. Like that's still pretty good, right? Like they're going to be pretty good for a while.
Yeah, you're around the ball.
Where you look at kind of the Eagles and the Niners, it's kind of right now. Now you can go, well, the Eagles have their quarterback. Well, he's going to start making a lot of money. So is that going to change the way they built their team? Because their team was a lot like the 49ers. Like, God, they got good players everywhere.
Yeah.
That's usually, it's part of why the Chiefs won it this year. It's like, well, they hit on a bunch of picks. Like, because they had to lose a bunch of players. They lost Tyreek and they lost Ward. I mean, those are fucking elite starters.
And then
Tyreek's a Hall
Pacheco
of Famer
just
and
looks like
Ward's
light
stud.
Tyreek light.
I know, it's crazy.
I mean, they missed. I mean, missed for a first round pick on Clyde, right? He has not been first round worthy. Edwards-Helaire.
But where they got Pacheco this year, and it's like whatever. And McKinnon's been, and part of it you got to get. Lucky's the wrong word because the right good teams have been all over McKinnon, but he's just maintained a pretty solid level of play.
Lucky in the sense that he's got to be healthy.
Yeah.
Roberto on the chat says, I'm not sold on Brock, just as I'm not all out on Lance. Maybe one steps up. At least we have a chance. Unlike the Jets, who are going to crater again this season.
Did you see the clip of Boomer with the GM?
No, with Joe Douglas? No. Was it on the radio show?
No, it was like a town hall type deal, but it was clearly like at a bar because Boomer was wasted. And Joe Douglas just like, he's going to be here. I've just never seen a trade that still feels pretty far away that everyone just acknowledges like it's done.
Yeah.
It's not done. Even the Jets are like, listen, we're not talking to anyone else. That'd be disingenuous. We got plan A and plan B and plan C is Aaron Rodgers. He's coming.
It's crazy.
It's a bizarre deal. It's a bizarre
And
deal.
neither really has – the Jets don't have another option. The Packers don't have another trade partner.
No.
Each of them pretends like they have the leverage.
Yeah, it's just it's very Aaron Rodgers and kind of the Jets. It's just it's pretty weird.
Right.
It's pretty weird.
They're a weird match.
Yeah.
Anyway, there you go. If Brock had been I guess if Brock had by that PFF grade, if Brock had been a first rounder, we'd be saying he was worth the pick, right? That's the beauty of a starting quarterback.
Well, I would imagine that draft meetings right now are in full swing all around the NFL. That scouts are sitting there, the coaches, depending on the group you're talking about, are coming in and out. Offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator coming in. Quarterbacks for the majority of teams, even good teams. Like if I'm the Chiefs, like I don't have a backup quarterback. I'd be thinking about drafting a quarterback in the third or fourth round. I would imagine Brock Purdy's name comes up a decent amount in draft meetings all throughout the league, right? Because if I'm a team with a quarterback, well, if we take this guy, like, can he be as good? Like, why? I would love that guy on our roster. I'm just saying like that because that of size, like Stetson Bennett, Jake Haener, just a lot of question marks. Usually guys that aren't drafted in the first couple rounds are smaller, right? They just have some major flaws. And it's just like, can we get something similar to that, right? Kirk Cousins forever. Like, can we find a really good player that just we feel comfortable with as our backup quarterback in the third, fourth, fifth round? Like if I'm the Chiefs, I don't know if I'd hesitate taking a quarterback in like the third round to just be a cheap backup for Mahomes. Would you?
Yeah, no, but is that the Brock Purdy? I mean, no, because Patrick's been beat up before, but I agree with you. I think.
But if I told you the Chiefs drafted Jake Haener in the third round, is it really that crazy? Like you're just?
I don't think it's crazy. I mean, especially with Andy, but like that's part of it is they have Andy, just like the Niners have Kyle, just like the Broncos have Sean Payton, just like teams have been fucking throwing darts at the dartboard trying to find quarterbacks forever. And I'm not disagreeing because I think you're right. Everybody is going to be talking about Purdy. I just think they're crazy if they think they're just going to. I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know what really changes in terms of quarterback drafting philosophy. They're still at the end of the day going to pick the guy they think is the best player. And that guy might be 6'3", and athletic. They're not like, tell me, is this version of Purdy, if the draft happens again, is he getting drafted ahead of somebody with much higher ceiling? I don't think he is because, all these guys are trying to Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. I mean, look at these guys. Now Bryce is short, but like they are physics for Will Levis.
But those guys are going high. I'm talking, after pick like 75.
When we get to the fifth round, like I'll believe that the league is drafting short guys with average arms over more athletic guys when I see it. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, it's easy to say we're looking for Brock. Then you're in the fifth round and the measurables are not even close. And you're kind of drafting blind a quarterback in the 5th round. Like, it's a crapshoot. Who the hell knows? So I'll believe that they start taking the less, although Brock tested okay, you know.
Yeah, to me, if Haener specifically goes in the 3rd round, that to me is a direct reflection of like, because more than likely he's going to start as a backup. Obviously, he is going to. That if he goes in the 5th or 6th, you're like, yeah, nothing's really changed, right? And Bennett goes in the 6th, 7th, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's true. But I would say Jake is a pretty unique quarterback prospect, even if Brock Purdy never exists, right?
100%.
He went to Washington. He's played in big
but he
time
is smaller,
games.
right?
That's true.
That's my point. Like his
but I would say, like,
measurables.
isn't he? Forget about Brock for a second. Tell me, you're scouting Jake Haener, friend of the show. If you put Brock aside for a second, like, what would be? You get into the meeting, like, John, you had Jake. You've seen Jake 4 times. Like, give us your evaluation. You could give a pretty strong evaluation on Jake Haener without ever mentioning Brock Purdy.
For sure. He's going to have a lot of people that really, really like him, right? Just like I would guess, looking back at Brock Purdy, people that did that area, probably there were people that liked him, right? It's just hard to...
Be interesting, yeah.
I think it's easier in a weird way, despite Jake... I mean, Fresno's not playing the schedule week in, week out as Iowa State, to kind of hammer the fucking table with your fist for Jake, then it probably was a little more difficult for Purdy, you know?
You think because Jake's
independent of each
small
other.
school guy versus...
Yeah,
what do you mean?
It feels like he's a little more of a gunslinger. I don't know. There's just some things, just his attitude. He's a little more of an aggressive personality than Purdy. And that honestly, that might be unfair to Purdy. I don't know.
So I think you're right. I thought what you were going to say was when you play at a non-Power 5 school like Jake, as opposed to Brock, in theory, you don't play with the same level of talent around you. And obviously Brock had a high level of talent. Jake had some pretty high level skill guys around him as well. They had a bunch of good receivers, good running back. But I thought you were going to say, like, when you played a smaller school, we see you against SC, Oregon State. Who else did they play?
He beat UCLA in that legendary game.
Yeah, beat UCLA. So we see it's almost more like it's on you, the quarterback, to lift all these guys who are going to be accountants and principals up to this level, right? I thought that's where you're going. But
Fresno never falls under that umbrella just because they always have skill
players.
guys on offense. Yeah. Always. Like, I mean, think about all the from Derek to his brother to Brandstater. Like, they always have NFL skill guys at tight end. Back when they ran the pro style, but now receiver and running back. And that's which Brock did too. I mean, he played with Breece Hall, and when he had them, they were really, really good, right? And then he got injured. I guess he had them. I guess they both got drafted last year, huh?
Yeah, they hadn't had that down year. Breece had the down. Breece was hurt his senior year. Is that what happened?
Well, he got hurt. He tore his ACL for the Jets.
Yeah. I
think they lost other skill guys. I just think there was a lot of hype on that season. And part of it is there's a narrative around your college team. Right? Remember, wasn't Iowa State like sexy Final Four team?
Big time.
And then all of a sudden they go 7-5, and he throws some picks, and it kind of goes the other way. Where Jake, think about this year, coming off a big year, they're really good, a lot of expectations. Then he gets injured, season almost craters. Then he comes back, they end up winning the league, and it's like kind of like, and he plays injured, and they lose to Connecticut. Wasn't that like the biggest underdog of the season?
I think it was the worst. It was one of the worst losses. It was one of the worst losses college football ever.
Yeah, it was like almost 40 points or something. Yeah, it was bad. Jim Moore,
without Jake.
Jim
Moore took him to. They go bowl eligible?
No, I don't think they ended up doing that. But
No.
So you got to build the case, kind of like a puzzle for every individual player. And with Purdy, it's like, well, they missed him, they fell apart. He came back, he helped save the day, right? With it was like, well, Purdy had all this hype on him going into the season. People were picking them like with Bama and Ohio State, and they fucking lose a ton of games. And it's why you got to be careful. And this is what's nice about having a larger body of work. Well, it's like, what about the other previous years, right? Where the coach would tell you he's the best player we've ever had in the program, right? In my career, the head coach cried on senior day. So it's like, and you see Tedford, I think I saw some quotes like, obviously is going to be a big proponent of Jake. So like, who's talking for you? And when it's clearly not like fake BS college, right? It's like, no, I think this guy's really good. Dilfer's always been a big proponent of like, he thinks Jake's an NFL player. He's been saying that for years.
Yeah.
Chris Peterson, you would talk to him. You talk to all these guys that have intersected with him that liked him. Jonathan Smith. That's what helps with. I think what makes the transfer portal kind of unique with draft picks is sometimes like You can talk like 7 different coaches, couple head coaches, couple coordinators, some quarterback coaches that became coordinators that all know the guy.
Yeah. What was he like when he came in as a new guy?
Yeah.
Why'd he leave? UConn went 6-6 and then lost to Marshall in the Myrtle Beach Bowl. So banner year for Jim Mora's squad.
Jim Mora just won't stop coaching.
Question on where did this go in the chat? Paul asks us. Nope, wrong one. I don't care about Will Levis's coffee mayo habit. Rafa asks, could DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson from UCLA, be an option for the 49ers at the end of the 3rd round? Seems too high, but
Yeah, I don't know if the 49ers are going to use a 3rd round pick on a quarterback.
why? When you could use the 7th.
Exactly. I just don't
And
think,
the Niners the draft doesn't begin for them until the 3rd round either.
yeah, I mean, their resources. I mean, they've invested now a lot on quarterbacks. First rounders on Trey. The pick, while it was a 7th rounder, but he's proven. Like, I just kind of roll with the group this year. Then if it gets weird, I'm not opposed to doing it next year, but I'm not wasting a pick. I don't think on a. At one moment, I thought DTR was like an athlete, but clearly he's he's going to be an intriguing. He's going to be the Ravens' 3rd round pick.
He is intriguing.
He's going to be the Ravens' backup next year. I mean, they love these Pac-12 fucking quarterbacks who
Huntley.
Everyone didn't think were that good, and then they almost won a playoff game with Tyler Huntley, and hell, they almost won a regular season game with is it Anthony Richardson? Is that also the Oregon's quarterback's name?
Anthony Brown.
Anthony Brown,
Yeah,
who's their 3rd string quarterback, correct?
Is he still? I know he was for a minute.
If I would have told you during his year with Oregon that he would be on an NFL roster in the 53, and no one would have believed you.
Would not have believed you. No.
And he made some plays.
Yeah. I know.
I would put money on DTR to the Ravens now. They love these Pac-12 run-around quarterbacks. Like, yeah, we'll win some 17-14, knockdown, drag-out game.
He might be good.
Who?
Him. DTR.
Well, he's a better prospect than the other 2 guys that they fucking functioned with.
I mean,
they've won games with Huntley.
Huntley was like a 70% passer his last year at Utah.
I know, but you've
not the same level of
the eye
prospect.
test looks a little different.
No, I agree. So
I mean, DTR is an elite athlete, isn't he?
yeah, tough too.
40 years old or
no? He true senior. Remember the story was he played as a true freshman at UCLA, but he hadn't played that much. He'd only played 1 year of high school quarterback because he was backing up Tate Martell at Bishop Gorman High School in Las Vegas. So he was like an undeveloped guy coming into college.
I don't think we talk about him. He's probably a pretty fascinating prospect for a lot of teams. High character. People like him, right?
Yeah. Oh, fuck yeah.
Really like him. I mean, you can't play for Chip at quarterback without being like Mariota character. So
yeah, he's everyone I know around that program thinks he's an awesome dude. So
he's only 23 years old.
He's been a starting quarterback basically for 4 years. I guess 4.5. Do you remember who he split reps with his freshman year at UCLA? Or kind of this guy started and then got hurt?
Was it a Michigan transfer?
The Harbaugh guy, yeah.
Yeah.
And a Niner.
It was terrible.
Wilton Spate. Wasn't he a Niner for a minute?
Yeah, he was. He's at training camp.
Yeah.
Kyle's got a, if you're 6'4", can't really move in a weak arm, he'll be interested.
Throwing 88-mile-an-hour fastballs from a 6'4" frame. All right, anything else on these subjects?
No.
All right. Thanks for hanging, everybody. Later.